Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Illumineers Quest podcast, where we talk everything Lorcana. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jacob.
And thanks for coming on this journey with us. Okay, so today is a fun one. Today is right before the first, so this is a Thursday before the set champs for Shimmering Skies, before Maribel top 8 cards this time, and top 2 playmats again. And so we wanted to touch on the most, what I'm calling impactful cards in each ink. Some of them I think will be very obvious. Some of them I don't think will be very obvious. And so the point is to try to help, people maybe grasp a little bit better how to, or when to play some of these cards, how to play around some of these cards if you know your opponent's playing them, and just certain strategies / cards to be ready for. Because, we talked last time on the episode Monday that there's a very kind of big meta void at the moment. And things are moving pretty rapidly. And so, just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page going into their set champs so that they can have as much success as possible, because we want everyone to do super well.
Absolutely. I mean, if we're anything, we're trying to prepare you guys for the competitions ahead.
Yeah, I mean, and it's obviously, I think, selfishly good for us too. Talking through some of the stuff just helps hammer it home for us as well, because
put it out there in the universe.
All of this is very beneficial for us to talk through and to get in the mindset of going into a matchup, being aware of it, know that it's coming, so forth, whatever. So I'm excited to do this too, because it's just going to help me as well. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it, because we got a good episode ahead of us. But as always, if you are needing singles for your set champs and you want to support the podcast, the easiest way to do so is using the TCG Player affiliate link. You can follow us at LorcanaPod at X/Twitter. If you want to email the show any questions, you can do so at lorcanapod@gmail.com. I think that there's just an overwhelmingly grateful amount of just sheer gratitude that we have. And I shill it every time, but I just really appreciate everybody's support. I know Jake does too. And so, as always, everyone, thanks. But, card of the week, you said the one that I had on my mind, so I'll let you roll with it.
I don't know the subtext. You know the subtext?
No, I don't know. Light on her feet, maybe. Something along those lines.
Clarabelle.
Yeah. Clarabelle.
Clarabelle 1-drop.
So Clarabelle is, a massive, I would say underappreciated, especially the 1-drop, I think was very underappreciated to begin with. But Clumsy Guest is the subtext on this one. So the one cost inkable 1/2 stat line, quests for 1, but it's very much a tempo card, because it says whenever you play this character, you may pay 2 ink to banish this item. So this is
banish chosen item. Yeah,
this could be a turn 1 play, but I also think this is very much a turn 1 play balanced with Mem Snake on turn 2, replay on turn 3 to then banish an item if you're playing into a Sapphire deck. And I will say I got by this in Vegas.
Did you?
Not that I didn't know it was coming. I'll be honest, I just was not thinking far enough ahead. No. Was I on the? No, I take it back. I think I was on the draw turn 1, and so I played it. No, I don't remember. I got got. Point is, I got by this, and I did go 1-1 into my Emerald Amethyst matchup, and the one I lost was because I played 2 items, and both of them got sniped by Clarabelle, and I couldn't draw the entire game.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Now you know.
Super fun, right?
So again, the whole point of this episode is to make you all aware of important cards and important tech that you might see coming up. And so if you're playing an Emerald Amethyst, tempo bounce package deck, then be very wary of Clarabelle, because the higher them on turn 4 or turn 3 if you've ramped on turn 2 is very disruptive to that card draw, and you need to either have a backup plan. Like this happened in one of the matches that I saw, but I think it was a Sapphire Steel player, and he had 4 items on board by that point, and so it was okay, well, you can take one of them, it doesn't matter. But I was not in that position, and I just had 1 down, and so it got sniped, and I couldn't draw. And so very, very good card. And then obviously is a, on turn 3 can stay on the board and then shift into big Clarabelle on turn 5. So,
which is even more fun.
She's very scary too.
But Clarabelle needed some love. She wasn't in the game for a while. She needs some love. She's got it.
Yeah, so Clarabelle Light on her hooves is the legendary one. So that's a big one too. But yeah, that's Clarabelle. That's a great pick because it's kind of a little bit of a fringe pick, but it is one that is very, very, very in the meta and currently very, very playable. And if you're not, I guess ready, like I already said, if you're not ready for that to come out and to snipe one of your items potentially, then yeah, you might be in a really bad position after the fact because you don't have any way to draw or to use said item that you were planning on using. So,
And again,
good
in a
choice.
non-item matchup, she's just a good shift target. Like she's there to
Yeah.
bring Clarabelle out early and cause a bunch of problems for you.
Yep. That's a very good point. So, okay, moving on. News, what's on our mind? Quick match recap, league info. I don't know, like what else is going on in the world of Lorcana. I mean, I think everything is really just like set champs
It's
pro.
all meta. I think my mind is just all meta based, like and trying to partly challenge meta, just because I'm super interested in that, and then local meta as a separate thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I will say that's kind of like changed since coming back from Vegas and the way that I've thought about things, it's very much like taking a step back and like trying to understand the biggest advantages that you can gather in the game. I think the easiest one to say is like, Sapphire's ramp. I mean, that's like one of the easy advantages. If you can ramp to like 6 or 8 pretty quick and your opponent's at 4 or 5, then you have a very distinct, clear ink advantage.
Yep.
I think Singers is another very big advantage that's easy for people to understand. Ariel, Spectacular Singer, since the day the card came out, has been one of the biggest advantages in the game because it not only finds the songs, but then it can sing them before most people would be ready for it. And so, establishing like a mindset on like what are the biggest advantages that my opponent might be trying to get that I need to deal with. And so that's like kind of the mindset that I've started to bring into the like my thought process when it comes into some of the deck building and some of the like theory crafting behind the game. It's like, okay, how do I deal with the different threats and the different advantages that my opponent are going to try to take to win said match? And so that's the biggest thing that I'm doing. It's not just like building a cohesive curve or building, some combos that work together like Hiram Pop or building, a very, powerful top end deck that's going to be hard to deal with. It's like, okay, so how is this going to deal with this advantage? How is this going to deal with an opponent that's trying to discard my hand? How is this going to deal with an opponent that's, trying to sing before the curve to get ahead of, my value by doing all that singing? And so all of those different, thoughts are what I'm trying to wrap my head around and start a thought process around that so that I can just be ahead of the meta, like kind of like you said.
I think that's a great point. Like every deck type is going to have its own unique advantage and distinct advantage over, everything else where it's just, it does its own thing separate from any other deck type. So I think to identify those as soon as possible and, really, what are the meats and potatoes of that, and try to figure out like the inner workings of that, and what's your advantage? What do you have over other decks?
Yep.
Just in general,
and understanding how to use your advantage and how to mitigate
to
your
maximize
opponent.
it. Yeah,
to mitigate your opponent's advantage. And we talked about it a ton in last episode because of Zan winning the DLC, but I hate to say it because I was a Prince John early train rider. And then I, started to hate the deck, and now I definitely hate the deck. But the discard mechanic does not have a counter. There's no, I guess Pete is like the one like stopgap that you can have to discard because Pete keeps you from, your opponent from playing cards. But aside from Pete, there's nothing that, I shouldn't say nothing because there's always an exception because there's magic. There's the Magicka card on Amethyst too that keeps, it says if you're on your turn, if on your opponent's turn, if you're meant to discard a card, then don't. But that's not a very playable card. And so there's no real meta defining way to deal with your opponent discarding at a elongated or, consistent pace. I mean, maybe you can take a turn off, maybe you can, deal with something here or there, but the vast majority of the time, if they're trying to discard a card, you're going to have to take a card out of your hand.
I saw this, I forget who it was by, but I saw this like Sudden Chill explained as like a 2-cost inkable song Dragonfire. Like it's basically what it is. And
yeah.
And it
I think Zan said it.
Was it Zan? I think it was Zan. And he was like, and even it mitigates any unplayabilities of that card. Like,
yeah, it's dealing with a Sudden Chill deals with a threat. It's just an unknown threat. You don't know what it is, But Sudden Chill is going to deal with a threat. It's going to get rid of a card without condition, just like Dragonfire. Dragonfire, takes a card off the board. This takes a card off the board before it can even reach the board. Which discard is just like when I like take a step back and like really rethink the discard scenario. Like discard is the most broken mechanic in the game by far.
If you're playing in any top 8 in set champs, or if you're playing in a challenge, every single card is useful. Every single one.
Yep.
So if you can, with the Ursula Deceiver Evolve, double sing Sudden Chill, and then on top of that, draw off John, like
it's
the value is nuts.
It's utterly broken. That's why that deck won. Is because the value that you get, the value trade that you get for that is plus 100 for you and minus 100 for your opponent, and that's a very hard hill to climb.
I mean, it's nuts. Like really thinking about it hard is like it's mind boggling. Like it is in this specific game, like it's nuts. It's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree. Okay. So, well, I mean, we're kind of jumping into it a little bit, but so yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. The actual discussion.
Were we not in the full episode?
No,
yet?
that was still our our thoughts, comments on the meta, and we said our minds wrapped around the meta and trying to understand. And I said I'm reshaping my thought process around the meta and understanding these different.
I thought we were in the episode.
These different advantages, but no, we're starting with Amber. We're going through the ink types.
Okay.
Okay. So again, these are the most what I would consider like impactful cards or cards to like look out for. Again, these aren't necessarily like the most powerful cards or the cards you need to deal with the most, but they're the most impactful. And so
Amber for me has an easy one.
I think we're on the same boat.
Okay.
Rapunzel.
Oh,
so you were going to say Ariel then.
I was going to say Daisy.
Oh, you were going to say Daisy's a good one too, for sure. But I was going to say Rapunzel. So Daisy's obviously like, again, that's one to look out for, but her impact is very apparent. It's on the board. I have to deal with it. Rapunzel, on the other hand, like you have to play around Rapunzel's ability, which is why I say Rapunzel is just as important, because if you exert one of your characters that can be challenged by one of your opponent's characters, and that opposing opponent character won't get banished along with you, then you really have to think, is it worth exerting? Mm-hmm. Because if your opponent's able to challenge in, banish your character, stay alive, and get card draw off of it, that's one of those advantages that can be very backbreaking, depending on your deck, depending on your archetype, depending on what your strategy is and where you're at in the game. That can be very, very detrimental.
I think it's a fair point, but I think to a certain extent, definitely in the early game, Daisy can just be just as detrimental, like to your.
For sure. I mean, Daisy can run away with the game if you're not ready for it as well. And so, yes, going into a game, if you're playing an Amber opponent that could be playing Daisy, yeah, you have to absolutely be ready for it. That being said,
does it completely change?
There's no like snowball. There's like no snowball effect that if you're not ready for, like it gets worse over time. Like there's no like. I can prevent that. I mean, if you're discarding Daisy, sure. We already talked about discard before we were even on this, blah, blah. There's nothing you can do to prevent Daisy. There's something you can do to prevent the Rapunzel draw. That's all. That's what I'm saying. So obviously both of those are very good examples. And, Daisy's one of the cards that was very meta defining in the early set of Shimmering Skies. And is still very much needs to be accounted for. That being said, it's still very important. I don't know the best way to put it. I mean, you have to be ready for it, but it's, it might come, it might not. And if it doesn't come, then, your plays or the plays before it comes aren't going to impact what you do after it comes. That's all I'm trying to say. But those are two good ones to talk about. And the third one, I think we already kind of touched on, but Ariel's the third one that I think is worth mentioning. In Amber. Yeah. Amber's, or Spectacular Singer is just another really solid one. Obviously her ability to find the songs for you. Her ability to sing those songs after she finds them, or for Naveen to come in and sing the song for free. I mean, I think Naveen's obviously worth mentioning too, but we've talked about Naveen enough.
I think I just love talking about Spectacular Singer because it's been a staple since day one. Yep. Like I just brings joy to my heart talking about it.
Yep. And so those are I think the big ones. The other like honorable mentions I would say would be Naveen, which I kind of just mentioned, mm-hmm. Piglet, which is obviously a very, big lore grabber in very quick fashion. And then lastly, Cindy, Ballroom Sensation. I mean, they're all staples in there. There's nothing like outside the norm there. But again, the whole like conversation around this is to be, getting yourself in the mindset on how do I deal with these cards when they come. So again, if you're playing an Amber deck and you're not in a position to deal with Piglet, the game's going to run away from you. If you're in a, you're playing Amber and you put yourself in a position to give your opponent an advantage of drawing cards off of Rapunzel, the game could run away from you. And so I don't think there's anything, like super like groundbreaking in what we're bringing to the table here from that set of cards, at least. But just again, when you're into these matchups, keep in mind some of these important cards so that they don't catch you off guard and you're able to deal with your opponent when that stuff does come out.
For sure.
Okay.
This next one, I don't know where you're going with this.
There's quite a few of them that probably deserve a place in the list. But do you have one that you want to talk about first, or do you want me to?
I mean, I'm thinking bounce package. Am I in the right realm?
No, of course, bounce package is the most impactful. I think the most. I don't know. I think misconception or misplayed potential is around Rabbit, and so I think he's the one worth mentioning the most.
I think so too, actually.
When I was, or when the bounce package initially came out, and the Rabbit, started to become a big thing. He draws a card when he comes into play. He draws a card when he leaves play. It just, it was never very menacing. But again, that advantage can very much snowball over time. And so whether you want to take him out or not, he's a very big threat and he needs to be taken out if he's not bounced right away. And so, whether you're on a song deck or, Ursula double singing, sudden chill, double singing, let the storm rage on, whatever it might be, like that has to be dealt with, because if it goes on the board, doesn't, get bounced and then gets bounced and replayed next turn, like that card draw, advantage starts to again snowball very highly over time, and you need to be ready for it. And so that's the one I think most people are obviously like most accustomed to dealing with Goat, because obviously Goat's going to close out the game for him. But if you don't deal with Rabbit, Rabbit's going to find the Goats that then get them to the point to close out the game.
Rabbit builds to Goat. Yeah, 100%.
The other one that I think is worthy of a mention at this point, which again is a new card and it's not like super off the rails, but Elsa the Fifth Spirit.
That's the one I was gonna. Yeah.
Is that what you were gonna say next?
Yeah.
This has caught me off guard, and when it catches you off guard, it can be very bad.
It can be, yeah.
Because perfect example is I was playing a tempo deck this week at League, and I had a Beast Tragic Hero on board, and I was like, cool, gonna keep drawing some cards. They don't have any damage spells. There's nothing they can do about it. I'm going to just ride this advantage to get to everything I need, and then continue to build my resource advantage to then close out the game. Next turn, Elsa, Fifth Spirit, Crab, boom, dead.
Super fun. I love that playline. It's great.
Yeah. So Crab was on the board.
Did it challenge into something, or did they bounce it?
No, they challenged. I mean, they had to challenge into it to finish it off. But Crab plus Elsa.
So they did it turn 5.
Off. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Which again, I guess depending on the turn and the ink and everything, like you technically could like bounce the Crab and just go into it with Elsa, or maybe he took out something else with the Crab and then Fifth Spirited. I think that's actually what happened.
Fifth Spirited first, then took out
Fifth Spirit, Exert Beast, banish something with Crab. Crab banishes itself, buffs Elsa. Elsa takes out Beast. So I'm pretty sure that was the play line. So again, that's one of those plays, just like Rapunzel, that if you're not preparing for in your like mental turns, will catch you off guard and can very much swing a game.
Yeah, because I think, like you're saying, in that mental game that you're playing while you're playing a game, I think you can get very caught in your own play lines. Like you can get,
I know I do.
You can get very like tunnel visioned.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, I do this. Oh, then I do this. Oh, then this works out. Oh, wait. Then all of this starts aligning, and you completely forget about what your opponent can do to that.
Yep. Exactly right.
And so I just think like if there's one thing you need to be cognizant of, it's okay, this is a good play for me. This is my optimal play. But what can my opponent do to completely disrupt that?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it can just really throw your entire game plan off, and you think you have the game closed out because mentally, you've figured out the line to get there, but then if something gets disrupted that you're not ready for, that throws you off your guard. Yep. So, yep. And then I think the honorable mention that we'll throw in here that's worth noting is just like all the early fodder. So your brooms, Your Cusco's isn't played near as much anymore. Your Chernobog's followers, all the stuff that, ends up banishing itself to then draw a card. That's all card advantage again. So, if there's any way to deal with that before they're able to get those cards, I think that's worth, pursuing, because again, Ruby Amethyst right now is very much a grindy deck. It's very grindy in the sense of, I'm going to just chip away at lore here and there. I don't really play any big lore gainers. I don't think they, the most standard lists play anything that gets over 2 lore. So when that's the case, like, you're very much just, lore here, lore there, goat play here, goat bounce there. I'm going to get to 20 lore. So it's a very, very grindy game. And so if there's any way for you to take off those advantages, whether that be card draw and chip lore, it's going to reap dividends in the long run.
Yeah, I can't agree more.
So that's another one worth mentioning. And then I think, just to close it out, you have to talk about the locations. Again, this is nothing, groundbreaking that we're bringing to the table here. But again, if you're going into an Amethyst matchup, regardless of the color pair at this point, I think there's a very strong possibility of the Queen's Castle and the Library. And both, can be backbreaking if not dealt with, unless you're like, I don't know, at 18 lore and, you can kind of just close out a game. Then I assume you can kind of just ignore it. But in general, it's very much worth noting that those need to be dealt with because, again, Ruby Amethyst specifically is just going to be prep you until it, gets enough lore to close out the game. And so you have to be very aware of how you're going to deal with those locations when they do come down, because that's one of their biggest closeout advantages that they have, is their very strong locations at this point. So.
All right, now to the fun one, right?
Any honorable mention? Anything else you think we missed that's worth noting, or we calling it good there?
I mean, just like mentioning the bounce package as a whole, like Fox, Snake, Goat, like just honorable mention those guys.
They're all good. All good. Okay, so moving on to Emerald now.
Maybe Friends too.
Friends we didn't mention Friends, but obviously I think that's very much worth. It's a staple.
Friends.
It's always around. I mean, everybody knows about Friends, but again, there's. Well, I guess we could talk about Friends for a second. So, taking out their singers. If you're ever in against an Amethyst player and you're ever like about to sing Strength of a Raging Fire or Let the Storm Rage On, or use Medusa to target some card, target the singer that can sing Friends. Like, that's the answer. If you're not sure, target the singer that can sing Friends, because
it's probably Rabbit. It usually is Rabbit.
It's usually Rabbit, which again, we already kind of talked about targeting, but even a Fox, if there's a way to take out a Fox singer, if there's a way to take out something that can sing Friends versus something that can't sing Friends, I would usually hedge on taking out the singer, because again, if they can sing, bounce, and then, be set up on board, then that gives them a big advantage. And so Friends is going to come. There's nothing really you can do to stop it unless you have Pete. Pete's going to be the answer to most of these problems, but just be ready to take out singers.
All right.
Okay.
Emerald time?
Emerald time. The crazy thing about this one is, as we stated in our kind of meta review, is that there's so many decks now running Emerald, between Lemon Lime, between Amethyst, Emerald, Tempo, Bounce, and between Emerald Steel, Discard. Each of them, I mean, there's a couple cards that I think are staples across all of those, but there's not many. And so again, we said from the beginning, like, there's so many tools in Emerald, but there's no real cohesive pattern. Now there's just a lot of patterns that you can go around. And so the first one, we've talked about them a million times. It's not going to be crazy. Diablo. Is it safe to say that Diablo is the number one demands and answer card in the game?
Yeah, 100%.
How many cards on average do you think Diablo draws each time he's played?
On average?
Yeah.
Do you have a stat for this?
No, I don't.
Oh,
I have my perceptions.
I'd say 2.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm kind of at like the 2.5 range.
Yeah.
And so any time that you can deal with a Diablo before that, you're doing really good. If you can, there are times obviously where I don't want to necessarily say it's a misplay from your opponent, but there are definitely times where your opponent plays a Diablo and isn't able to get any card draw. Sometimes, making your opponent take a turn off to deal with Diablo is all you need.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But yes, playing Diablo demands an answer. And so if you're, again, going up against an opponent where you expect a Diablo to be played, What is that doing to your mulligan? We haven't really talked about mulligans yet, but what are you doing to your mulligan that's going to allow you to deal with the threats that you know are going to come? If you're going into the blind, it's a little different, but again, I think that can be played so early on, especially if you're shift, if they're playing the discard shift, they could technically get them out on turn 1. And so it's like, what are you doing to deal with Diablo? No. Are you in a position to deal with him? And again, we're in, I think, a very Emerald heavy meta now. And so you have to be aware of Diablo and how to deal with him.
I think it's completely fair. Like, when you're thinking about, like, whenever you see a card that can deal with, like, a 2 strength card or a 2 willpower card, it's like, oh, hey, this takes out Diablo. Like,
that's 100%. Absolutely. I mean, that definitely is like a massive consideration to be had these days.
I mean, when Fifth Spirit was first revealed, it's like, oh, Diablo.
Yep. And again, that's a very important consideration. I think the challenge there is obviously it's very much later in the game. Mm-hmm. But again, Diablo can be played after the curve, or not on curve, and still needs an answer. And so yeah, that's a very insane Diablo answer for sure. Fire the Cannons, Ba-Boom, Brawl are all very, front of mind ones that do it. If you're on a Songs deck, you've obviously got Strength of a Raging Fire, Let the Storm Rage on, grab your swords, if you're still in the steel package. So yeah, there are quite a few answers. It's not one of the most like busted cards where it doesn't have an answer, but it very much demands one when it's played.
It's not like it has a ward.
Yeah.
Like I'm setting you up.
Like Prince John.
Okay, yeah.
We've talked enough. I don't want to go on for like 10 minutes about Prince John because, it can go on and on, but now that we're in a Prince John world and we're in another Emerald world where things have ward that are very pesky to deal with and very problematic for the long-term game, it does need to be dealt with. And so again, I said this, I think on the last episode, where I do think that Grab Your Swords does make a pretty solid resurgence in the current metagame because of Prince John. You just need to deal with him. Again, he's another Emerald card that demands an answer that can snowball his advantage over a couple turns if you don't deal with him.
I mean, Emerald is basically the epitome of that.
I think Zan was running like 22 discard cards, 4 Sudden Chills, 4 Hypnotize,
4 Bruno, 2
Anna, 4 Ursula Deceiver.
How many is that?
I think 20. I mean, yeah, it's
roughly.
Like, and then I don't think he was running Your Welcome, but yeah, I mean, then you have the Muses to bounce Ursula. And so anyways, the point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of discard that can happen in the Emerald Steel deck, like a lot. And so if you just let them snowball that advantage, they'll have all the resources that they need to close out the game, and you'll have none resources.
Yeah, none resources.
So yeah, it's another one that you just need to be aware of, and we're now in a meta. Again, I'm not saying this because nobody knows Prince John. I feel like if you're listening to this podcast,
we're a broken record at this point.
You probably know Prince John. The meta has changed. You need to be aware of how to deal with Prince John and at least have an answer in your deck. If you don't have if your deck does not contain an answer to Prince John, you're probably losing. Like that's just, that match you're probably going to lose.
Which is the same situation with Diablo. Like,
Yep. I think that's fair to say. So yeah, I mean that's really all I was just say. I don't want to spend again like 45 minutes on him because we've talked about him quite a bit. I think we touched on all the other discard cards there, so there's no massive point to talk through.
Deceiver might be number 1 for me. Like
Deceivers, I think I said this last time too. We should probably if we did a true 1 through 10 top 10 most impactful cards in the game. I think there's a difference between impact and best. I still think Heroic Outlaw is one of the best cards in the game. I just don't think it has a place currently to actually get that impact, if that makes sense.
That's fair.
So I think Ursula is probably top 2 or 3 impact cards of the game. I mean, I really can't think of.
And the other card that would be in that conversation does this very similar thing, in a similar sense, I would say.
Pete. Pete. Yeah, Pete's up there too for sure. So yeah. Yeah, I mean Ursula. Probably should have started with Ursula to be honest, because I think she definitely has the impact on the overall game to deserve that spot. Because not only does she discard something from you, most likely she can also sing Sudden Chill to discard from you. She can also see what's in your hand, which again for the Emerald Steel match is very important because the knowledge on is my Diablo going to die if I play him is important. The knowledge on do they have Be Prepared in their hand that I need to be ready for in 3 turns?
Yeah.
The knowledge on, do they have like a Maui that I shouldn't exert my Prince John and Quest this turn because they're going to have a Maui to come and take it out. So there's just a lot of info that you can get from that that's very helpful. So yeah, Ursula is definitely like one of the top overall impact cards in the game. And again, I think everybody's very much aware of that, but you have to think through your plays in a way to deal with that, especially the mulligan. Again, I haven't talked about the mulligan enough because I think that's very overlooked in general. If you're playing an Emerald and you're on the draw, do not keep a song in your hand. Like, period. Just mulligan them. Because if they come down with Ursula on 2 and they take it, then it's GG. Not GG, but you know what I'm saying. It's very much a very big detriment. If you can minimize the amount of impact that Ursula's having, that's going to give you the best chance of winning. Okay. Last card I think is worth mentioning at this point is probably Morph. We touched on him a little bit, I think, last time too, but Morph gives the ability to shift anything onto him. So Robin Hood, Tinkerbell, Beast. I don't think there's many Emerald shift targets that people are playing these days. An Emerald Steel is the big one I think that we're talking about, but I think there's a world where you're playing Emerald Amethyst tempo, and you could use Morph as a shift target for Ursula. You can use Morph as a shift target for Clarabelle. For Ursula Sea Witch Queen, the Amethyst one, which most people are just shifting on to Ursula Deceiver or Deceiver of All, and so you don't necessarily need more for that, but that is a strong potential there. So
I mean, you can if you have to switch shift Diablo if you have to.
Yeah, I mean, you could shift. I mean, there's just again the possibilities are the ability to predict what is coming when Morph is on the board is 1,000 times harder than when you have a normal shift target. And so it just, again, it's one of those that I don't want to say demands an answer, because there might not be something coming that you can't deal with, but it's a lot harder to deal with something that you can't predict is coming. That's, I guess, the end of the story. Okay. Anything else? I mean, Under the Sea, I think is obviously an honorable mention, but that's again one that you're just going to kind of, Muses is obviously very strong. I mean, there's so many different archetypes in Emerald now that, we could go on and on about Emerald, I think probably.
We'll just say most stuff with Ward. That's what we'll say.
Yeah. if it's got Ward, it's pretty good. If it's a one-sided board removal, it's pretty good.
We'll give a honorable mention to a shout out to Bucky because of his
honorable mention shout out to Bucky. Okay, so Ruby. When I say Ruby, what's the first card that comes to your mind?
Maui.
Is that because you saw it on my phone?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's fair.
I didn't actually see it on your phone. It's down there. It's down there. I see it.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one that comes first in most people's mind. I mean, again, it's just like the staple since day one of the game.
My mind just clicked on another one.
Okay, well, what's the next
Sisu.
one? I think about Maui before Sisu.
I do too, but like
I think there are other cards I think about before Sisu even. I think Lady Tremaine, or not Lady Tremaine, sorry, Madame Medusa. I think Madame Medusa probably comes up first, because there's basically the meme online now that it's terrible, dies to Medusa.
Yeah.
And so when you have a meme around you because you're so good, like that tends to lend you needing to be ready for it.
Bucky and Medusa,
which is why Medusa is so good. But yeah, so I think Maui again is one of those just like really impactful cards that can come in and basically take out everything on turn. We just talked about last time, not exerting your Prince John because a Maui might be coming. That's one of those that you should be ready for. In the Amethyst matchups, anything on board plus Maui takes out a castle, which is incredibly powerful in a massive tempo swing. It basically puts your opponent into the, okay, now I have to be prepared phase versus, okay, now I have to just, maintain my board presence and, protect this castle. So yeah, Maui's insane. Maleficent Monstrous Dragon will continue to be the, unregulated board removal, and being inkable is insane. But yeah, I think we're in like a very weird camp now between like Be Prepared and Sisu. So you mentioned Sisu.
Yeah.
Sisu is, obviously the legendary uninkable 8 cost that, has the ability on play that banishes any character with 2 strength or less. And the ice blocks were a big proponent into enabling her to banish more. However, with the, increase in Emerald and the increase in faster decks, I think there's a lot of targets that are becoming more and more harder for Sisu to hit. So Madame M. Fox is a perfect example. It's very hard into like the tempo matchup because you've got the new 2-cost uninkable Shinzi the 3/2 that quests for 2. If they've got a Shinzi and a Fox on board, you have to have 3 ice blocks to take care of them both. Like that's just not going to happen.
Sure.
If they've got a castle out, you're not going to take care of that. It's just not going to happen. So I think that, like, I was on 4 Sisus at the Vegas DLC. I was very much on the Sisu on ice. This is the package. This is the tempo swing that I need to put myself in the driver's seat and to make my opponent start answering my threats. And yeah, I just think that most people started to get ready for that and playing higher cost strength characters to make you have all your ice blocks out, or you won't banish most of their board.
Hidden Cove actually came back too because of that
Hidden
too.
And I played an opponent with Hidden Cove, and it was incredibly annoying.
Which probably gets somewhat of an honorable mention in Emerald.
Probably should. But yeah, I think, don't get me wrong. Sisu is still insane. There's still a lot of room for Sisu in the meta, especially in an Emerald Steel world, especially in an Under the Sea world. There's a lot of advantages that Sisu gives you, and the tempo swing that she can give you is probably the best in the game. I don't think that Under the Sea is obviously a massive tempo swing, but with Sisu, you get a massive character on board and you're banishing most, if not all of your opponent's board. Under the Sea is just using your turn to erase your opponent's board and keep yours. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference there. So Sisu is still insanely good, but I don't think,
end all be all.
Yeah, end all be all. The one that I will bring up now that I think is kind of under the radar again, that will be a good one to mention, is Scar.
Yeah.
The legendary 7 cost, the vicious cheater. He has rush, he has 6 strength, 5 willpower, he quests for 2. He can, chip away at all the little grunts on the board if you're in Steel Song. If you top deck a Scar into Under the Sea, he can pretty much take out that entire board too, because everything's pretty much got 2 strength or under. He can take out Prince John and any of the other little minions that you've got in Emerald Steel. I think I was testing with him before Vegas, and I just never felt like I got in like a really comfortable rhythm with him, and so I didn't go full in. But I think there's a world now where Scar is revisited as a potential inclusion, because once you get to that 7-8 ink, then you've got your Be Prepared options, you've got your Scar options, you've got your Sisu options, and so I think finding the right combination of those for your meta is going to be what's going to win you the games if you're a Ruby player.
Yeah, I remember like when Scar first started hitting the ground running a little bit, and it was like, oh wow, this can kind of hit you out of nowhere. It's a big battle axe that just decimates the board.
Yep. Again, there's the scenario where you're not thinking about Scar coming out, and that just decimates your board. And if you're in a position where that happens, then you can very much ruin your game plan and ruin your match, because you might have 3 or 4 characters out, but if they're then all gone, then they're all gone.
Rush is the number 1 ability for that, just coming out of nowhere. That's what it is.
Rush ready. It's the combo of the two, because Maui.
No,
Rush,
I agree.
obviously.
It's Rush in general too. I think is the number 1.
Yeah, of course.
Always have, if you're playing Ruby, have that in the back of your head the entire time.
Yep. And then I think honorable mention, you have to talk about Flynn.
Nice.
Flynn Rider Frenemy.
We're on the same wavelength.
Yeah, just because if you don't talk about Flynn and his impact into the Ruby Amethyst matchup, for them to get some really quick lore off of you, I feel like if you can stop their Flynn, the Ruby Amethyst matchup is a very, very, very winnable game for just about any deck. Okay, so moving on to Sapphire. My favorite card, I think currently just my favorite card in general. Aerial Treasure Collector.
Oh, okay. Now,
is that what you expected?
No.
What were you thinking was coming?
I was thinking more Flav Pop.
Yeah. Those are obviously like the staples, but I think my favorite card,
or even maybe Cogs too.
Cogs, yeah. I think the Sapphire staples are like very set in stone. I don't think that there's many like massive impact cards. Well, there's one, but that it has a bunch of impact, but it's not like a character card that most people would think of, or a staple, because it's relatively new. Staple is probably the better word. I don't think Area Treasure Collector is a staple because it's not in every Sapphire deck, but it's currently my favorite because, again, Ward.
Yeah.
Ward. It sticks on the board. it quests for 5. You can dime tap it for 5, and if they can't remove it with essentially be prepared, then you might get 10 lore next turn.
Super fun to play against.
Which 10 lore is a big chunk of lore.
And there's nothing you can do about it because it has ward. Like nothing you can do.
Yeah, you gotta be prepared. Essentially, be prepared is the answer. It's, be prepared, be king, and Tremaine are essentially like the 3 viable removal options because 4 health is not really in the grab your swords range. I mean, if you double grab, cool. I mean, I think you took your entire turn to do that, and then I can come back and answer. But that's one of them. I mean, you mentioned the rest of the staples. Hiram Pop are obviously the 2 big ones. Flaversham being in that same boat as Diablo and as your Prince Johns that just like demand an answer. If you let your opponent draw 4 to 6 cards off Flaversham, you're probably losing the game. And I know that's very dire, but that's the truth. If your opponent's Flaversham sticks on the board and is able to draw them that many cards, they're going to have a card advantage and an ink advantage because they're going to be able to ink with Fishbone or How Far I'll Go or One Jump or whatever their ramp card of choice is, and then they win the game. So
simple as that.
Really is.
Yeah.
Really is. So anyways, yeah, that's kind of Sapphire's very much well known. I would be remiss if we didn't talk about Tamatoa. Being able to get back your lucky dimes, being able to get back your popsicles to create more card draw advantage for Flaversham to draw off of, Tamatoa getting a dime back, playing your popsicle, questing with Flaversham gets you 3 cards in one turn, plus the card you drew for turn is 4 cards in one turn. Like that's just a back-breaking resource advantage that is very hard to deal with. And so, Ruby into Brawl or Ruby into Medusa are 2 very good ones. I mean, I think Baby Sisu has seen some play because of that as well. So yeah, I mean, I think there's quite a few advantages or quite a few options in Ruby. Outside of Ruby, it's really discard them. Like genuinely, that's the best way to deal with it. Is if you can't deal with the Flaversham themselves, then deal with the hand size so that they can't get that ramp advantage because they don't have the cards to ink.
Yep.
So those are the 2 big ways I think to deal with Flaversham.
You gonna mention visions?
I was leaving that for last on purpose.
Wow.
So I think, again, if we talk about most impactful cards in the game, we talked about Ursula. We talked about, Pete we haven't really gotten to yet. But Ursula, Diablo, Flaversham. I mean, a lot of these very staple cards, I genuinely think Visions deserves to be in that same conversation because in Ruby Sapphire, you need to find a Be Prepared to clear the board. Dig 5 cards deep. What other card can you say can dig 5 cards deep for 2 ink to find the answer you need? If you have a Tamatoa on board and you need to find a dime to tap, dig 5 cards deep. Like it's very like the amount of value that you get for such little ink is almost bar none because it does its job and it does its job very well.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna the advantage that it can build is nuts.
There's a ton of the other way to think of it is there's a ton of so in Sapphire Steel and in Ruby Sapphire there's a ton of combo pieces. There's Flaversham plus pop, there's Tamatoa plus dime, there's Be Prepared I guess isn't really a combo piece unless you're trying to sing it, which at that point is a combo piece. There's Sisu for the removal on the Sapphire side or on the Steel side. There's a Whole New World for your card advantage plus a singer. There's, you're needing to find your dime for Aerial Treasure Collector. There's, again, your Tamatoa and your dime. There's just so many combos of these 2 cards that you need to really pop off. Visions finds it and closes out the game.
Yeah. I mean,
it's
going to find it.
When you dig that, you would say that, but I didn't tell you this story either. I was playing a Mufasa deck, and so of course I was behind on lore because, they got out pretty quick and go. On the second game, I needed to find a Be Prepared, and I pretty much won the game at that point. I had vision back to back. I had a vision, found a vision, used second vision, didn't find Be Prepared in any of those 10 cards. Guess what the 11th card was? Yep, you guessed it right. It was Be Prepared.
No way.
So yeah, but the point is you're never getting there without it. Yeah. Right. So anyways, I think Visions is one of those very underlooked cards I didn't fully appreciate. Because I was still kind of on the develop your brain train. I was like, oh, I want to develop on 1 if I don't have my one jump so that I can try, dig one card deeper to try to find one jump to play onto, I'm all in on Visions now. Visions is the way of the future. I wouldn't, I guess I wouldn't be remiss without mentioning Let It Go. Fishbone Quill obviously is an amazing staple of it.
Tipo?
I am a Tipo hater at this point in time. I hate Tipo, actually.
Okay.
You cannot play Tipo into an Emerald World. Just can't do it. If you're nuking your own, if you're nuking your own hand,
that's fair. So then why is Fishbone okay?
Because it inks it's a constant, like if you're top decking in an Emerald World, everything you draw just gets inked until you get to 7 or 8 ink and you get to that Be Prepared, you get to that Sisu, you get to that Scar where you're constantly inking. You're just like, okay, for four turns, I have to take it off because I don't have any cards. If those 4 turns you draw uninkable cards and they just get discarded, you lose the game. Okay. If you have Fishbone on board and you can just keep inking, it gives you a chance to at least get back in it.
Fair point.
So yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. Visions is definitely my favorite card in Sapphire. I really don't like Tipo anymore in the current meta. Is it a great card? Sure. In the current meta, I hate it. So yeah. Okay, last but not least, Steel.
Definitely not least.
No, in the current meta, definitely not least. You're going to see a lot more Steel, a lot more Grab Your Swords, which I think is the first one to talk about. We already talked about it a bunch on answers for other issues. So yeah, Grab Your Swords. I was on... I think 2 of most of last set and the beginning of this set with Bucky, Prince John, all, Ariel, Muses, all of the other stuff in Under the Sea, all the stuff in Emerald Steel, all the stuff in the Tempo Bounce. I'm back up to 3 swords. I think you just have to have those answers. I'm also running Visions now in Sapphire Steel. That's not a very common practice. But again, like if I'm in a world where I have to answer Diablo, you best believe I'm going to dig 5 cards deep to try to find the answer to answer that Diablo. Yeah. It's a great top deck into finding a whole new world in the discard realm. If you top deck that with a Singer on board, you find your whole new world, you wheel them, you call it good, you're back in the game. So I think, I think Swords is very much back on the table, especially if you're a Steel Song player too. Very much start considering Swords again. I know it's very hard to fit because of all the uninkables, with Naveen, Lanterns, Piglet that most people Daisy that most people are including in their decks now. But yeah, I mean, Swords is definitely the top of my mind given the current meta, with a whole new world being a close second.
Yeah. I mean, whole new world is like, it's almost like a staple of the game at this point.
Oh, it definitely is. There's 2
it's just,
there's 2 battlegrounds of the game. There's the board battleground, which is the very obvious one, but there's the resource battleground too. And the resource battleground that we've been talking about thus far has been dominated by Prince John and all the discard. What's the best way to mitigate Prince John? Just dump your hand. You dump your hand, I dump my hand, which I might not have any cards in, and we both get 7 and we both reset the game.
Yeah, I mean, at that point.
And then with your Steel removal packages, theoretically, you could then, deal with their board, and then you're really back to an equal game state. And so I think that those 2 cards are very, very important given the current meta state to deal with the threats and to, either push you so far ahead that they can't come back or get yourself back into the game where you have a chance again.
No, I mean, you passed Tinkerbell.
I did pass Tinkerbell. Yeah.
On purpose?
No, not on purpose.
Okay.
I'm just scrolling here, trying, looking for other like top cards to talk about. I have a couple in mind, but yeah, Tinkerbell is very much back in the meta too. I would say it's shocking actually that Tinkerbell kind of fell out at the beginning of this set because Steel Song was very much on the aggro phase and took out a lot of those targets with, like Robin Hood and Cindy being the only 2 like big cards because they were the more or less like required shift lines.
Yeah, which is funny because Emerald Steel is it's doing Beast and Tink instead of the alternative, which is Cindy and Robin Hood.
Yeah,
it's doing the other 2.
Which I think both still make sense for their current decks. But Tinkerbell is back in. With the more aggro-iness, and maybe not aggro is the right word, but more like wide control that you're getting from your tempos, from your Emerald Steels, from your Steel Songs, all of that, early game tempo control or tempo speed, Tinkerbell kind of, thwarts that. She really puts a hold on the board when she comes down if you can't deal with it because most people don't want to get 2 for 1. She deals 1 damage to everything. So, grab your swords plus Tinkerbell takes out a ton. And we're back in a meta where that's very much, on the forefront of importance. And so, yeah, Tinkerbell is definitely back in the mix.
And now with Morph being played, like a Tinkerbell shift on Morph is nuts. Like it's crazy.
Yep, that's why Morph's really cool, because it's very backbreaking, because you can't necessarily predict if it's going to be a Tinkerbell or a Beast or what might be coming. But the next card we've already mentioned probably 6 times, so I guess it's worth mentioning for real this time. Pete.
Oh, okay. All right. Like, I don't even know what to say about him. Like, I mean, you and me, like, there's a few naysayers out there. It's like, it's all right. And then,
I think I don't know if that was just like a meme thing to get people off of him because he was that good. But yeah, we're again talking about like top 5 impact cards in the game. Ursula Deceiver, Pete, Prince John I feel like it's very hard to put something else in that group right now. Like Flaversham, I would think would be in the top 5. And then honestly, I don't know, Be Prepared maybe. That might be my top 5. But yeah, Pete definitely deserves his place on like the Mount Rushmore at this moment. Again, Ev's, the like counteracting, the decks that want to do nothing but play a bunch of songs and get a bunch of advantage. Emerald Steel, Under the Sea, Steel Song, all 3 of those just get completely thwarted by Pete. If you play a timely Pete into Under the Sea, they can't Under the Sea. That gives you another turn to then build all that advantage to do your thing, to clear their side of their singer so that they can't sing Under the Sea. For Prince John, that keeps them from discarding a card from your hand for a turn to let you build your resources back up. For Steel Song, they might just have a hand chock full of songs and not be able to do literally anything. So Pete keeps you from singing Be Prepared, obviously, or playing Be Prepared.
Let's bring up the songs real quick while we're on that. Like
the most impactful songs?
I mean, no, Steel, Zeus.
Oh, Zeus, Strength, Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are the 3 staples, obviously, aside from A Whole New World and Grab Your Swords. Yeah. But I think Zeus, Zeus, and like it depends on the deck you're playing, but those are the 3 big ones, obviously. I've been saying for, I think, 6 weeks now, I want a new damage dealing song because we haven't had one since set 3. Storm, or was Zeus set 4? No, Zeus was set 3 too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Zeus was set 3. Set 2 was Storm and Strength. Set 1 was Swords. We haven't had one for 2 sets.
Do we need a 3 damage dealer?
Yeah, we do.
I think we do.
And I think we need something else besides Swords that deals widespread damage. I mean, there's Avalanche, but that's not a song, and it's uninkable, and it's kind of like meh.
It's pretty bad.
So I think there needs to be more widespread damage or more non-targeted damage to deal with ward. Like that's what we need.
Or just something that goes through board.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can sing this to target a ward character. I don't care. I mean, if that's the way you want to handle it, go for it.
Yeah. I mean,
or something that I've said this for a long time too. Something that lowers ability. Something that like you play a Pete and it's like all characters on board lose their abilities for a turn. So it's like you don't actually have ward anymore. You don't actually have evasive anymore.
I like that.
So again, I actually haven't played video games much at all the past probably year and a half, but for a while I was a big Valorant player, and there's a character called KO, and he has his ultimate ability like throws out this like force field essentially, and anybody within the force field loses all their abilities.
I'm sure that's not toxic in any way.
It's really fun. It's really fun. I mean, and same thing. Like, so imagine like you've got, I don't know, like even like a Chernobog's followers in play. Like you banish the Chernobog's follower. Well, the Chernobog's follower, that doesn't count because that one doesn't when you banish it. But well, I guess, yeah. So like if you play it, it's for like till your next turn, they can't banish themselves and draw a card. Like that's impactful.
I get what you're saying.
So anyways, yeah, I think that's, Pete's probably the other one that's really worth talking about. If you're not ready for a Pete to come down to disrupt your turn, you might lose the game. I've lost probably 4 games where my opponent played a Pete where I had like my whole turn mapped out. I was like, their board's gone. I'm going to win the game. They play a Pete and I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So if you're not in a state to absorb a Pete play, you're going to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that
Robin Hood Heroic Outlaw. I got to mention him real quick.
Champion of Sherwood? Heroic Outlaw? Robin Hood Heroic Outlaw?
I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Well, Champion of Sherwood.
Okay. I think that pretty much covers it. Again, these aren't necessarily like the. I mean, I don't
No,
know.
they
I
are
guess
the
they
best
are the
cards.
best cards. I
They're
mean,
the best
that's
cards.
why they are the most impactful. Is these are the cards that have the most impact on the game in and game out, and you have to be thinking about coming and how to play around them and how to play with them so that you can further your game and have success. And so, again, just want to get everybody in the mindset on how to use these cards, how to play around these cards. What cards to consider for set champs, because those are right around the corner and all month long. And so. We will be talking about them quite a bit. Like I talked about last week, we're hopefully going to have Mo on here. They finished top 8 in Vegas pretty soon. If not next week, I'm very hoping the week after so we can get it in before Seattle for any other final tips for that. But yeah, thanks again for everyone for hanging around with us and listening, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Bye, guys.